Hey everyone, welcome to another day of notes. It's Mr. Smith, your 8th grade U.S. history teacher here at Madonna Middle School, and today we'll be covering Chapter 1, Section 3. And your notes today are going to cover a topic known as the Silk Road, and we're going to look at how connected were individuals from Europe, Asia, and Africa. So let's get to it. All right, CNN Student News. I am not going to ask you to watch CNN Student News because you probably are watching this video because you either missed class and or you're preparing for a quiz or a test, and I do not need you to go out of your way to watch CNN Student News. Is it great at showing what's going on in the world around us? Yes, that's why we watch it in class, but I do not need you to watch it right now for the sake of your absence notes or for watching and preparing for a quiz or test. In class, we watched CNN Student News. Then we moved on to 20 minutes worth of notes where we're going to talk about some wealthy individuals in East Africa and West Africa. We're also going to talk about the Silk Road and what that was and the impact of Asia. And then I'm going to have you work on a Silk Road reading and questions that are on your notes page that you can do on your own. And then you're going to work on a race response as your last activity for your notes today. And the race response is going to be something where you are going to need to cite evidence. So we're not working on a paragraph response. You're not just saying, here's what I believe because I believe it, but you actually need to create a claim and say, here is what it is. I believe this because, and then supporting it with evidence from a historian or a scientist that's out in the field doing research, and then explaining what that evidence or that citation means. And we'll get to that race response in just a minute. All right, so the three things that we're trying to answer today are: how did countries or groups of people trade? What's the importance of trading in the past? And how did the Silk Road impact something known as the known world? And we'll get to what the known world is in just a moment. By the end of your notes today, you should be able to identify and explain the impacts of trade on cultures and civilizations in the world, or in the known world specifically. All right, so on your tree map, the left-hand side of your notes, you should see a tree branch labeled the Muslim Trade and Link. Anything in yellow needs to be written down on your tree branch section. So on your first branch, anything in yellow needs written down. The white is great information, but I'm not going to ask you to go ahead and write it down. You can if you want, but I'm not expecting you to. So just what's in yellow. So what is this Muslim Trade and Link? Well, before we actually get into the notes, you need to know what a Muslim or who a Muslim individual is. Essentially, a Muslim is a person that believes in Islam. So if you look at religion, you have Judaism, which is basically started with Abraham. Then you have Christianity that follows parts of Judaism, but then believe that Jesus Christ was a Messiah. And so they follow the teachings of Jesus Christ in Christianity, hence Christianity, Christ. Islam, or people who are Muslim, follow a prophet that came after Jesus Christ in around 600, and they believe that Muhammad is the last prophet of God, or he is the prophet that speaks for their religious beliefs and their religious systems. So that's who Muslim people are. They believe in the prophet Muhammad. Their religion's centered around Saudi Arabia and the Middle East around the 600s. So years after this religion and this culture has spread, by the 1500s, you have Muslim merchants and traders who are going to create a vast trade network or routes or roads that are going to connect what we call the known world. So Europe, Asia, and Africa. Forget North and South America just for a moment. Yes, it has Native Americans and civilizations that are just as important as what we are going to call the known world, but we are going to call North America and South America the New World, because people are going to forget about North and South America. They're not even going to realize that there are those two different areas of land across the Atlantic Ocean, or Pacific Ocean if you're traveling from Asia. So the known world is Europe, Asia, and Africa. So we're just talking about those three continents. So what happens as these Islamic merchants and traders are creating this vast network, you had to have Islamic kingdoms basically capture other kingdoms and make sure that it was safe for these merchants to travel there. So what these Islamic kingdoms did is they would go and war for North African countries or North African tribes and kingdoms, and they would take them over, and they would expand their beliefs, their food, and their culture, so almost every aspect of their way of life or their way of living, into the new land that they had taken over and conquered. And so what happened is you have these merchants going into this Islamic kingdom, they're spreading their beliefs, and they're trading their goods. It seems really rough that this Islamic group of people would just come in and take over and then allow traders to come in. But what benefits these newly taken over lands from these Islamic rulers is that these Islamic rulers and these traders and these merchants that are going into this land aren't just taking over and say, do what you want, or we'll kill you all off, go die. What they're saying is, we're taking over, we're going to enforce our new rule, and we're going to enforce our culture. And so what they're doing when they trade in different areas or they're taking over land is they're not only taking over and spreading their culture or goods, but they're not only trading their goods, but they're trading their culture. So their knowledge of how the earth was round. They're trading their knowledge that triangular sails work better than other sails. They're trading their knowledge of algebraic equations or pre-algebra equations that you're going to use in Ms. Tunstall's class and different things like that. Medical advances are also being traded. So this Muslim link is not just allowing the Islamic kingdom to expand into parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa, but it's also allowing ideas to spread across parts of the known world, which is benefiting the lives of different individuals around the known world. So how could these Islamic countries or kingdoms, they're not countries, these kingdoms come in and take over? Africa basically paved the way for these Islamic kingdoms to come in. So by 1500 AD, East African kingdoms had established trading centers where traders were paying taxes or a fee or a price on the goods that they were bringing into that city. So what these East African kingdoms were doing is they were essentially setting up major trade centers that Islamic kingdoms and rulers would come in and take over later. Zimbabwe is a specific example where they had such a vast trade network that they had goods and even African slaves that they could trade with the Chinese all the way across the Indian Ocean. So Zimbabwe's creating vast trading centers. Other trading centers were going to pop up in different parts of Eastern Africa and also Western Africa. In this image, you see a picture of Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was a West African king, and he was one of the most wealthy kings of all time. And basically what Mansa Musa does is he converts to Islam or follows Islam, and then he basically takes a pilgrimage or a trip to Mecca, basically the focal point of Islamic culture. And you should have learned about the 5 pillars of Islam last year with Gunderson and Felker. One of those 5 pillars is taking a trip to Mecca. And so what Mansa Musa does is he tries to follow one of those 5 pillars and take his trip to Mecca. And as he goes on this trip, he takes about 10 years, he literally dishes out cash everywhere he goes. So he's giving people money, he's giving people gold everywhere he goes. So wealthy, it doesn't even affect him. That's how crazy wealthy Mansa Musa was. He was one of the wealthiest people of all time. He could just give gold away to other kingdoms, say, here you go, better your life with the gold that I'm giving you. Crazy. Africa sets up these trading networks that connect all the different parts of Africa to Europe and Asia. So if it weren't for these trade networks, no one would be able to go anywhere and travel and trade different goods and ideas and parts of their culture. All right, so how did Asia, so moving kind of across the world, how did Asia play a part in establishing trade networks or linking these different networks of trade that were in parts of Europe and also parts of Africa? So what China does is in the year 2021 BC, China's going to come under one rule. So they're going to have an emperor that's going to lead and rule the Chinese people. And what these Chinese emperors or Chinese rulers are going to do is they're going to work on fixing the infrastructure or fixing how the Chinese people live lives. So these rulers wanted their Chinese kingdomians, their Chinese individuals in their kingdom, They wanted them to have a better life. So how do you create a better life for your subjects? Is you create highways. You create postal systems so people can write letters to one another. You create canals so that your people can travel by boat to different areas around China and in China. And that's what these emperors did. They expanded the Chinese Empire so much that they had different roads and canals that connected different parts of India, Korea, and also Japan. One, so their individuals lived better lives, and two, so that they could spread their culture to different parts of the world. The Chinese also made huge advances in navigation, so how you plot a point and actually travel or walk to that specific location that you plotted. So you can say, I want to travel to a different part of Indiana, but how do you actually navigate there? Is it by car? Is it by plane? And the Chinese were really great and pivotal in inspiring the world and creating systems to navigate better. So how could they locate a position and plot a course, mainly on their ships, to get to those different locations, especially as we talked about before, like with Zimbabwe, who was one of their main trading partners during this time. China is also going to be connected all the way from Japan to East Africa. So it's setting up roads and routes that are connecting East Africa to Asia. A huge expanse of territory that these areas are now connected because Africa and Asia set up these trade networks. They're trading not only goods, but ideas and beliefs. Okay, the Silk Road. So the Silk Road is the name that we call these trade routes that stretch from basically China to modern day Iran. You could say it stretches even further than that. So the Silk Road stretched mainly from China all the way to different parts of Europe and Asia. The Silk Road gets its name from silk. So if you see in this picture, you see silkworms, and I actually watched a video over the summer of how you create silk. The Silk Road gets its name from this very valuable, expensive material that was traded on the Silk Road. And why is it so valuable and so expensive? Well, the answer is very short. It takes a long time to create silk. It is a very difficult effort to create one strand of silk. And if you look in this picture on the right, you see lots of teeny tiny strands of silk that have all been woven together to create this very luxurious, soft, smooth material that was traded along the Silk Road. And what's interesting is actually how silk's made. Basically, it comes from when a silkworm creates a cocoon before it becomes a moth. You boil the cocoon. And basically it destroys the proteins or the fibers that was going to create this moth that this silk was going to become. And then you basically extract strand by strand these silk strands from these cocoons. So you boil off the silk pod or this cocoon, killing off the soon-to-be moth. So it's no longer a moth because if it broke free, it would destroy the silk. Then you basically remove the worm. And then you slowly, strand by strand, siphon off each string of silk. And sometimes the strings of silk can be as long, I want to say this, but double check me on it, and I'm sure I'll look it up before I tell you guys in class, but it's almost like 9 to 15 football fields long. That's how long these strands of silk can be. And that's one single thread or single strand of silk that we're talking about. We're not even talking about the entire rope of silk that you see in that picture. So the Silk Road gets its name, long story short, because it's a very expensive material or good that's being traded along these routes that stretch from China to Iran and also parts of Europe and also Africa. And so what merchants did is they would trade this expensive silk along these different routes for different European and African goods. So if you think about the Silk Road, think of it almost like Amazon. You have merchants trading different goods across the entire world. You have people traveling by ship to take these goods to different places. You have people traveling by land to take these goods to different places. It's literally essentially like the first Amazon, except it only traded or they only sent goods to Europe, Africa, and Asia. So think of it that way. It's this huge path or this huge trade route where people are trading not only goods, but also their religious beliefs and their ideas about things like mathematics, science, history, and different things like that. The Silk Road is going to hit a hitch though. Eventually what's going to happen is that the Silk Road is going to be full of robbers. If you know that someone's carrying a lot of precious materials, especially silk, along this road, and you know that you as a robber can rob people and then sell that good for a higher price, you're probably going to do it. That's why people steal things from people today. They know, oh, there's wealthy materials there and wealthy resources somewhere. I'm going to steal it and be lazy, and then I'm just going to try to make money off of this stuff that I stole. So what happens is travelers on the land are going to realize that this land is full of robbers, and we can no longer travel across China without thinking that we're probably going to get robbed. What also happens is that China has a very ginormous network of mountains or geographic features that makes it very difficult to travel across easily. And so what merchants and travelers start to realize is, well, there are robbers, and there's also this huge mountain range that I have to cross in order to get to China. If I'm in Europe or East Africa, there has to be an easier way, a safer way to get from Europe and Africa to Asia. And so what people start doing is these merchants start looking for a safer route via the ocean to try to find a way to Asia so that they can still trade their goods, trade their beliefs, and trade their religious ideas all across the known world. And we're going to see in just a couple of days how that desire to find faster routes to Asia to trade goods and resources is going to cause a hiccup and cause Europeans to find North and South America without actually realizing it's North and South America with the discovery, or rediscovery we should call it, of Christopher Columbus. And we'll get to that in just a couple of days. So hold on to that. Know that we're looking for faster routes to Asia to try to trade our goods, and we'll get to the rest of this information in just a couple days. All right, so the Silk Road reading, it's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to need to make sure that you're looking at those images or reading that text and then answering those questions on your paper. So read the questions first, then look at the pictures or the text and answer the questions in full, complete sentences, restating the question in your answer. All right, lastly, what you need to do is work on your race response. So what you're going to be answering in your race response are these 3 questions. How important was the Silk Road to past civilizations? So think about, what were people trading on it? Why were people needing it? How did the Silk Road spread culture? And do we in the world have anything like the Silk Road today? So think back to, what is a culture? Culture is the different beliefs and ideas that different groups of people have. How important was the Silk Road to these civilizations? How did it spread their culture or their beliefs and their ideas, their goods, their resources, their art, things like that? And do we have anything in the world today that also helps us expand our culture or expand our beliefs or expand trading different goods and products? So take your time. Make sure you're using your notes. You can also use the previous Silk Road reading and questions that you answered earlier to help you work on completing and constructing a full paragraph race response. Until next time, Mr. Smith out.